Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Monday night, December 20th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I'm just putting the chat room open now and just getting that up and running here. And, yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be able to continue to do these shows. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I want to continue talking about, taking a look at this article that I found on a particular website we were looking at last week as well as now tonight. And I don't know, how it's a lengthy PDF actually. It's 26 pages long. And it is I'll give you the actual link here. It's from the Canadian Resource Center for Victims of Crime. It's http://crcvc.ca. And it's called, if you go to that website, you can look under resources, and you click on resources, and then look down on the left-hand side of the page, and there'll be some articles. And this one is actually called "What is Child Abuse? Let me get you the correct title: Child Abuse: How to Help Victims." And this is from June 2006. And they said that the person who wrote this their name was Hillingworth, and that's all they said. So I don't know, who Hillingworth, whether it's a woman or a man that wrote this article. Hillingworth wrote this article, June 2006, and I just found it was quite some good information on here. There's myths and facts, just an introduction, to the consequences of child abuse, and we're going through that. It's a Canadian article, it's coming from the Canadian Resource Center for Victims of Crime, but it doesn't matter. It's some really good information, and there's myths and facts, and that's where we left off. And so I won't go back all the way through those, but there's all kinds of stuff. Like there's a myth here that they said most children are sexually abused by strangers. They said it is estimated that approximately 85% of all child sexual abuses are perpetrated by an offender known to and trusted by the child. Only a small percentage of perpetrators fit the stereotype of the stranger. So, and this is a Canadian article, and that's 2006. Right now they're saying between 90 to 95% of abuse happens within the home, and it happens it's generally somebody the child knows and trusts. So somebody, a family member or close family friend, somebody that the child knows and trusts, right? So that's the latest stats. But this is a Canadian article, so those stats that I'm pulling up on a lot of different websites are from the States. And so the stats would definitely be different. The numbers would be different, right? But either way, it doesn't matter. Even if it's 85%, it's horrible, and no child should ever be sexually abused by anyone, right? So I kind of got a little heated there on Friday night, because I was just, sitting there thinking myself as a victim, I'm a victim of child abuse and child sexual abuse, and I'm a survivor, actually, thank you, and makes me sick to my stomach, that this is going on. It's still going on, and, there's, right now with the systems that we have in place, how are you going to stop it? How are we going to stop these people from doing this? So that's why I'm doing these shows. It's really to raise awareness and education, to talk about this issue. We all have to be a voice. Really, our voices do count. They do matter. And the more we speak up and we speak out against child abuse, the more something will be done. If we all stay silent, which is what everybody wants, the perpetrators, the abusers want everybody to stay silent so they can get away with what they're doing. And they don't want to get caught and get busted, right? So, and most of them would like to continue to abuse, so that's why they don't want anybody to be talking about this stuff. Society doesn't want anybody talking about it because it's so painfully disgusting that this is happening to children. So many people are survivors, and it's very uncomfortable, to hear about this stuff. And then other people in society that were not abused don't want to hear about it because they're thinking, why should I have to hear about this? This is horrible, and I don't want to hear about it. Of course, most people do think child abuse is horrible. It's just that a lot of people don't want to deal with it because it is so ugly and heinous. And abused children, to most of society, abused children are, when people look at the pictures and the articles that come out, and they see these photos, they're like, oh, that's so ugly, it's so disgusting. They're talking about a child here. The act is ugly, and what's happened to that child is ugly, but that child is not ugly. And I was one of those children, who was beaten and battered, verbally abused, psychologically abused, emotionally abused, and sexually abused. So, it offends me that people don't want to help stop child abuse. You know what I mean? That's what offends me. But anyway, it just really bothers me that society wants to keep this hushed up, because the only way we're going to ever change this thing is if we actually really start talking about it, and actually all of us start talking about it. This is a huge issue. Children are suffering at the hands of the very people that are supposed to love them and care for them, protect them, and take good care of them and nurture them and bring them up properly. And then there's all these other sick and twisted people that get a hold of children, you know, strangers, daycare workers, babysitters, distant relatives, you know, teachers, coaches, mentors, you know, just about anybody can be an abuser, grandmas and grandpas, you know. Sadly enough, right, children are suffering. So that's why I'm doing these shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion. And I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen paying to do these shows. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we are working to, you know, promote education and really to, you know, speak out against child abuse and to stand up for child rights and to stand up for survivors, you know, and to make some noise, you know, because we all need to be a voice, and all of our voices do count. Believe it or not, they really do. As a whole, they do count. And so it is important to raise your voice. And so as a survivor, you know, I couldn't think of anything better to do really but speak out against child abuse. You know, I 4 years ago decided to get involved and break the silence. And really it's only been the last year and about a year and 2 or 3 months that I actually broke the silence. But many people I had talked to in the past knew about what had happened to me, and lots of kids actually witnessed it when I was growing up. And there were people, you know, lots of people knew about it. The social services knew about it. My parents were arrested and brought up on charges of child abuse, right? So it's not like it was hidden away from everybody. Everybody knew that we were being abused. It was the society just not wanting to get involved. You know what I mean? And most people are always willing to turn a blind eye. They're willing to ignore it because they don't want to have to deal with it. It's like, okay, if we pretend we didn't see that, then we don't have to be involved, right? But they're not thinking clearly because there's clearly the child is being abused, and so if you know about abuse, you have to do the right thing and you have to make the phone call because it's really against the law if you don't. It is the law. You have to report it. And if you suspect a child being abused, do the right thing and make the phone call. Half the time they don't remove the kids anyway, but at least there'll be somebody looking into it. You know what I mean? Which kind of, you know, does put the parents on a little bit of a, maybe we got to straighten up, because generally it is the parents. Almost all abuse is inflicted on a child is the parents or one parent. The other, 5 to 10% will be a stranger or somebody getting a hold of a child, but mainly it's family member. So it's very important to know, you know, that if there's somebody looking in on the situation and social services are called in, you know, at least the people will have to sort of straighten up for a while, and maybe we'll get some help for that child, right, instead of just leaving them in the home to suffer and possibly die at the hands of these people who are supposed to be caring for them and who are actually killing them. So this is the sad fact, right? This is what's happening out here. So you have to listen to my shows, you know, at your own discretion. I talk about everything to do with abuse. All of my shows are like that, and I think my shows are, you know, very sensitive because people, you know, the topics of abuse are very sensitive for most people. For me, I don't mind talking about it. Excuse me, I'm just losing my voice. I was just over on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio there just a bit ago. And but, you know, I don't mind talking about it because I was much more uncomfortable being abused than I am talking about it. You know what I mean? It made me extremely uncomfortable to be abused. And so talking about it's not a big deal for me. But I had to get over the shame, and I had to get over the, you know, the feeling that really that I wasn't worth it, and that I was just, you know, worthless and all this before I could actually be a voice even for myself. You know what I mean? So I worked through that about 4 years ago, and then just about a year and a bit ago went public with my story. And so I've been on a healing journey for 4 years now, and it's awesome. I'm so happy to be on this side. But I know people are suffering on the other side of that, and I know what it's like. I've been there, and I just, you know, try to encourage people to hold on and, you know, get some help wherever you can, you know, a counselor, therapist, somebody you trust, you know, friend, just, you know, online group support, whatever it is, just to reach out and get some help, you know, because you know, I'm thankful to be here today because 4 years ago I was contemplating suicide, as I had always been doing since I was, you know, I would say a young adult. So, you know, I hope people will, you know, stick it out, right? There's so many of us here on this other side now saying, come on, you can do this, you know, and people are encouraging me. Just that's why I want to be a voice, right? So you have to listen to my shows at your own discretion. Young people under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows because I believe in protecting children at all costs at all times. And so young people under the age of 18, just have somebody listen to the show with you who's older, an adult who can help you make the decision whether you should be listening to it. And then, they can help you if you have questions. They can help you maybe answer some of those questions. And then if it's not age appropriate, they can it sort of help you to make a decision on whether you should be listening, right? So I appreciate that very much. So we'll get into this particular PDF. It's 26 pages long, so obviously it's taking a while to get through it. But there's some myths and facts here, and we won't go back over them all. But I want to pick up where we left off, and we left off at a myth. Most children who are abused do something to cause the abuse to occur. And the fact is, this is Hillingworth saying, that the child is always the victim. The responsibility for the abuse lies only with the adult, or the abuser, right? In the case of child sexual abuse, many offenders try to shift the blame for their actions by accusing the child of being seductive or promiscuous. That's where we left off on Friday, and that's why I was so upset, because I was like, there's so many people out there that child sexual predators and pedophiles who say, oh, well, the child, these little 3 and 4 year old girls and boys, they wanted it. They wanted it. They actually brought it on. And it's like, that's a sorry, sick, sad excuse, because I know I was molested by a family member when I was 8, and there's no possible way children want that. You know what I mean? They don't even know what that is. You know what I mean? Unless somebody sexually makes sexual advances at them, molests them, rapes them, whatever, or exploits them in some manner. Children are children, and they're innocent until their innocence is stolen. And so, it's very important for people to realize, that there's a lot of sick people out there that like to do things to children, and if a lot of them are family members, and parents better start waking up to this fact that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be abused sexually under the age of 18. That's the stats. That's what's happened already. Now, who knows in the future, right? But we know that 1 in 6 girls and 1 in 6 boys have been abused sexually under the age of 18 in some way, whether it's unwanted sexual touching, exploitation, molestation, rape, you name it. And it's so sad, because that should never happen. And that's 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. That's the stats of what's already happened. We don't know about the future now because it hasn't happened yet. That's too many. That's way too many. And I mean, I knew lots of kids who were abused sexually as children, who were molested and by different family members and stuff. And I myself was being molested as a young girl. And I just cringe when I hear this kind of stuff, because it's like, parents, you got to wake up and smell the coffee. That generally it is a family member. And sadly enough, there's a lot of really sick, twisted people out there that think it's okay to do this stuff to kids when it's not. And so, if your child comes to you and they tell you that somebody's doing something to them, don't just brush it off. Don't just ignore the child. Children don't lie about stuff like this. They've done studies, and they did find, I think that they substantiated one case one time that the child was actually making it up, but they said generally everything else that's been substantiated has been substantiated. So you really have to take your child seriously if they come to you and they tell you something like that, because children don't make that stuff up, right? Myth: if a family is reported for suspected neglect or abuse, the children are automatically removed from the home. That's a myth, right? If a family is reported for suspected neglect or abuse, the children are automatically removed from the home. The fact is, children are removed from their home only if there are conditions that threaten their lives, their safety, or health. And that's the truth. And the whole issue, I know this firsthand because we were not removed from our home. Sadly enough, I was a toddler, and my parents were brought up on charges, child abuse charges, both of them, because they were abusing us. And so the whole issue is there was 5 of us in the home at the time. My parents had 7 children. 2 moved out. 1 got married. But the oldest daughter got married when she was 17, just turning 18. She was gone. My other brother moved out when he was 16. He left the home. He took off. I would have too, because there was a lot of abuse at that point. There was a lot of my brothers were being abused by my dad mainly, but my mom was very abusive as well in every way. And so they were both brought up on charges, and they were both told to get help. But they didn't see any imminent threat to our life, of course, which is really funny because my mom bashed my head in with a rolling pin and could have killed me. One more blow could have just killed me, right? I was very, I used to pray that she would kill me. I used to actually tell her to kill me. I'd be like, just kill me, please, one more blow, because that puts me out of my misery. But she would never, she wouldn't do the last blow, so I, of course, wasn't killed. And I used to pray for it and wish that I was dead. You know what I mean? Because I felt dead, and I really felt that she had killed me, mainly my mother, because she was my main abuser. Sad thing is that many times children are left in the home, because they don't see any imminent threat, and then the social workers don't come around anymore after a while, and the abuse just continues, and it's just quite horrific what happens to children. Because my mom, when the time that she did bash my head in with a rolling pin and actually beat me severely was I was 13 and a half, and the social workers had been coming around until I was about 4, so that was 9.5 years later, and after 9.5 years of being abused in every way. You know what I'm saying? So after the social workers were out of the picture, my parents were free to do whatever they wanted, and they did. And so absolutely horrific. You know, you can't go back and change things, so I don't speak out against CPS or DHS or any of those guys. You know, Child Protective Services are out there to do a job, and they're out there to try to help save children's lives. Sadly enough, they do remove some in error. There's a lot of problems with corruption within the system, and, you know, we all know that corruption's everywhere, you know what I mean, and that's sad, because who pays the price? The children do. And a lot of the parents are crying the blues, but really it's the kids who are paying the price. You know, the parents might feel like they're being put out too, the other parent, but it's the kids that are paying the price for that. And so it's just so important that we get the programs, you know, straightened out and get something done, you know. But I don't speak out against CPS or anything, because I just wish that they would have removed us from our home, you know what I mean? Even though I had the opportunity to leave the home later on because there was intervention done, I just chose to stay in the home, because I do talk a lot about this on my morning show. So if you ever want to go check that out, I do talk about this. This is really what I talk about on One Child Abuse Survivor to Another in the mornings. But this show is mainly for information purposes. But the thing is, you know, I mean, I had the opportunity to leave, but I wanted to be a part of that family. I did not want to be thrown out. My mom was always throwing me out of the house and, you know, cursing at me and spitting on me and beating on me and then throwing me out and slamming the door and telling me not to come back and, you know, kicking me out of the house. So I was the only child she was doing that to, out of all these kids that were going to prison and getting in trouble and doing drugs. And you know, I was a good kid as far as I was concerned, and she was always using me as the scapegoat, as the punching bag, as the one to throw out, you know. And I was like, there's no way you're not throwing me out. You didn't throw any of the others out, you know. She never threw my brothers out, and they were pretty bad. So I was just kind of like, there's no way you're going to throw me out. That's why lots of times children will, you know, young people will make these decisions, and then, you know, later on you question yourself. You're like, why did I do that? And then I had to think about it, like, why did I do that? And I came to the conclusion because I knew why I did it, and I sat back and I thought, yeah, that's exactly why I did it, because I was really trying to force my mom to love me. I was trying to force her to accept me into that family and trying to force her to treat me like a decent, you know, parent would treat their child, and of course that was going to be impossible because I was born out of rape and she hated my guts. But I mean, what can you do, right? I mean, it's like you can't force your parents to love you. So, but I was trying, and you know, it's unfortunate because I really should have. That family intervened for me, and I should have gotten out at the time, right? But I didn't. So there you go. But lots of this stuff happens to kids, right, all the time, and it's absolutely horrible. You know, and that's the whole issue. That's why we have to stop child abuse, right? It's so huge. It's just absolutely crazy. So it says, who commits child abuse? It is a myth that child abuse is committed by strangers. Abusers are, most of the time, well known or trusted by a child. Typically, there is a power difference between the abusers and victims. Abusers tend to be older than their victims. Another myth about abusers is that they abuse children because they suffer from mental illness. Most people who sexually exploit children are actually functional members of a community who have made the decision to exploit their power over someone who is vulnerable to them. Child abuse is a crime of power. Abusers may be rich or poor, executives or blue-collar workers, men or women, and that's the truth, or even children. Anybody can be an abuser. Anybody who chooses to abuse, anybody who chooses to hurt another individual for their own purposes or for for some type of control issue or whatever is choosing to do so, right? Who are the victims? The commonly accepted statistics indicate that 1 in 3 females and 1 in 6 male children are sexually abused. This translates into millions of children being abused each year in Canada alone. So see, these are the stats in Canada as well. And I mean, this is the stats really North America wide. Horrible. I don't know about Mexico. I don't think anybody ever checks in on Mexico. For Mexico, you know, they got a lot of problems, a lot of abuse down there. It's just commonplace down there. It's, you know, that's pretty bad down there. But I mean, we have rules and laws up here, and people still don't uphold the laws. You know, it's like, you know, people just continue to abuse their children, continue to abuse their partners, their husbands and wives, and get away with it. And you know, society doesn't want to hear about it. Nobody cares, you know. But you know, there is a lot of people out here who do care, thank God, and I'm so happy to be able to know some of these awesome advocates out here and to be, you know, not just dream catchers for abused children. There's lots and lots of people in Australia. We have lots of advocate friends in Australia who are working, you know, really behind the scenes all the time, in their own country to try to change the situation, and they do a lot of good work. They help a lot of people, and they're not necessarily behind the scenes. They're out there, but I mean they're just working 365 days a year all the time, and it's amazing to see that. I know people in the UK as well, and people kind of worldwide who do this, right? So thank God for people who are willing to stand up and say, we've got to stop child abuse. Child abuse is wrong, and it's got to stop. Which generation is it going to be? I say let's just let it be this generation. And everybody who wants to get on board, let's go, because there's a lot of work to do, and we are running out of time because kids are dying. And we don't have time to be sitting around lollygagging around. Like, we really have to get busy. And, I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is doing. I mean, we're just right in the doorstep of, really a whole national program, a national situation, right? We're just waiting on funding. So once that funding comes in, you'll see us go national. We'll be nationwide, Canada-wide, United States, all over the place. We're just trying to get a headquarters going right now, because once we have a headquarters, we can do what we need to do from there, you know what I mean? So it all has to sort of fall into place, right? But it's all good because we're going to be out there and we're going to be everywhere, right? It's great because we're really going to be in the public face saying, "Come on, man, we've got to get this done. We've got to stop child abuse. We've got to prevent child abuse. We've got to help families. We've got to help children. We got to get this done." No child deserves to be abused, and we've got to change this society and change the way that people feel how they feel about children, right? Says how child abuse occurs. He writes here, Hillingworth, he or she writes, there are various ways that child abuse takes place. Child sexual abusers, they use a variety of ways to get a child involved into sexual activities. Some abusers introduce sexual activities to a child in the form of a game or sex education. Others offer a reward to a child for engaging in sexual activity or use physical force. Not only is physical power used to drag a child into sexual activity, but also psychological power and threats are used. For example, abusers instill a sense of obligation to a child, saying, for example, "You owe me for blank that I did for you." Threatened with violence, physical separation from loved ones, harm to a pet, etc., are typical strategies used in child abuse. This is all manipulation. It's all it's just what they do. It's what abusers, especially child sexual abusers, do to groom children and then to manipulate them and get them to do what they want them to do, right, and to stay silent. Child abuse is not a one-time occurrence. The same victim is often continuously targeted by the same abuser. As time passes, the abuse generally escalates. For example, in the case of sexual abuse, in the beginning, an abuser shows his or her part of their body, and then as time passes, it progresses to kissing, fondling, masturbation, penetration, and so on. And during this acceleration process, threats and violence seem to be typical. Abusers will try to convince the child that nobody would believe him or her if he or she told about the abuse, or that it might break up the family and the victim would be taken away from his or her parents. And they'll say anything. Like, they'll tell children anything. They'll say, you'll break up the family and the family will be mad at you if you tell. So you have to keep this between us. Or they'll make it look like a game, and if they start, children off young enough, people start abusing children when they're really young, which is just sick and disgusting and twisted, but we know it happens. They get the kids to think it's a game. And the children then don't know anything else but that the fact that it's a game, until somebody, hopefully busts them, they bust the abusers. But the sad thing is that children are not sex toys. And that's what my big beef was last Friday night. I was so really very angry and really had to go ahead and just voice it out because I'm so sick and tired of people molesting and using children for their own sexual purposes and raping them and sodomizing them and doing these horrible, horrific acts to 11-week-old babies. I'm so sick and tired of seeing these headlines roll out. I mean, every time you turn around, every day there's a headline out there, man rapes 11-week-old baby. Mother rapes a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old child. I mean, my God, what are these people thinking? Children are not sex toys, and they're not for people to be using sexually. Children are children, and they should be allowed to be innocent and be children until they make up their mind to choose their own sexual partners and whoever they're going to choose when they grow up and they get to the age of consent, as far as I'm concerned. Really, they should wait till they're old enough to make the proper decision for themselves, and then they can choose, and with the help of hopefully some caring parents, some suitable partners for themselves. But I mean, this is ridiculous for adults to think that children want to have any kind of sexual interaction with them. These are sick and twisted people. And you know how many there are? For every 1 in 3 girls and for every 1 in 6 boys, you think of how many abusers there are. If there's 1 out of 3 girls being sexually abused in some way, that means there's an abuser there for every 1 out of 3 girls. So who are these people? These are the people we work with. These are the people that are sitting in the offices. These are the people that are sitting in cars on the same streets that we drive down every day. These are the same people that own the stores, run the shops. These are the same plumbers, and then these are the same people that, these are the sick, twisted individuals who like to sexually use children. And they don't walk around with a sign painted on them, I'm a child sexual molester, I'm a child sexual abuser. No, they don't. So, these are people that we see every day. We walk by them every day. This is sick and twisted. I mean, I actually look at people now like, are you a child sexual abuser? Because 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. And I was sexually molested by a family member. So I'm just like, I know how sick people are, right? And I know that my dad was, sexually abusive to my mother. He was raping her, and I mean, it was horrible. I've seen the worst side of society in my own family. And so I'm looking at these other people going, man, I know some of you people are sick. You know what I mean? Because 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be abused sexually in some way. So this is just it. They don't wear signs on their heads saying, oh, I'm a child sexual predator, or I'm a pedophile. No, they don't. It's very, very hard to tell who they are. You know what I mean? And it's really sad because mainly they're family members, and they are generally getting a hold of the children in the family. And that's what they do. So it's very, very sad, sick, and twisted, right? They go on to really talk about the laws up here for, the Canadian laws and stuff, which I won't even really get in on because it's just numbers, right? It's mainly just bills and numbers like that. But then they go on to talk about like the criminal code and for the different sentencing and stuff like that. Now, what I want to look at is possible signs of abuse. I think this is really important to look at. And we have about 5 minutes left. The show goes so fast. So it's not always easy to recognize child abuse because it happens at home, or children may try to hide the abuse. And these signs may not always be present, but should be viewed as warning signs. There could be physical injuries like cuts, bruises, burns, and fractures, right? Lack of adult supervision is another one. Sexual acting out, difficulty walking or sitting, evidence of poor hygiene. And I mean, this would be something that you would see on a child like sort of like a pattern. You would see, it's like if you see a bruise on a kid, one time, and it just looks like the kid is so loved, and so that's something that you still kind of keep an eye on it. But if you see a child who's just bruised all the time, and the parents always have some excuse. Oh, he fell down. Oh, he hurt himself. Oh, she hurt herself. Oh, she fell down the stairs again for the 3rd time this year. You got to kind of look out for stuff like that because kids don't generally fall down the stairs 3 or 4 times. If they are, that's parental neglect because they're not putting up a child safety gate, and the kid's falling down the stairs 3 or 4 times, which isn't good. So, you got to kind of wonder about some of this stuff. And if you see a child who's used to be outgoing and all of a sudden their behavior changes and they start to, sit very quietly by themselves and they don't want to talk to anybody, they may start having like poor hygiene, things start to change. You notice like, wow, this kid definitely looks a little different than they used to. They used to be outgoing and now they're just sitting around by themselves. They don't want to talk to anybody. They're just shy and they might have difficulty walking or sitting. Then you better check it out because that you will notice changes in the behavior, right? But if you don't know the child as well, it's a little bit harder to spot, right? But there's evidence of poor hygiene, aggressive, disruptive, sometimes illegal behavior, anger and rage, self-destructive or self-abusive behavior, suicidal thoughts is a big issue. Even though some children grow up in perfectly good homes and then have these issues going on with self-injury and stuff because of just many things going on in their life. Could be something going on with their school mates, like bullying or who knows. But it's still something to keep your eye on. Passive, withdrawn, or clinging behavior, anxiety and fears in general. If you see a child who's just got a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, start crying for no reason. Then if a child starts crying because they think they're in trouble and they start freaking out, that's a real big sign. That's what I used to do. I couldn't believe that people would not get me some help because, if I thought I was in trouble, I'd be cowering. I'd be just like crying and freaking out because my mom would beat the crap out of me for no reason. So if I was in trouble, I'd really be beaten on, and kicked around and really hurt, injured, And so if I was at school and I did something that I got in trouble for, I'd be freaking out. And you would think people would would notice that, right, and be like, no, honey, it's like, what's wrong? But instead of that, they were like, oh, you're just a crybaby, and they just blew it off, even knowing that this is social services were involved, CPS and all this, right? So that's the whole issue. It's absolutely sick, and people allow abuse to continue, and they don't do anything about it, and that's just really unfortunate. So we'll have to pick up the rest of this article on Wednesday night. So we'll take another look at the rest of this, and there's quite a bit left here. So we'll be checking this out. I hope you will go check it out yourself from the crcvc.ca, the Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime, crcvc.ca, and this is called Child Abuse, How to Help Victims, and it's a 26-page PDF. It's a great PDF from Hillingworth, I think. Yeah, Hillingworth is the person who wrote it. So thanks everybody for being here. Have a great night. If I can get you any information, let me know. I'll be on tomorrow morning, same time, same place. One child abuse survivor to another, 6 a.m. And tomorrow night, Elizabeth Brawley will be taking over the show, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, because she's taking over for me, so I can take a break tomorrow night. So thanks everybody. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye.